So our next speaker is Steve Schmidt, who is the Vice President of Operations for New Jersey American Water. And you're going to talk about specific water supply issues in Monmouth County. So I'll let you drive.
Oh, yeah, I can.
You won't let you
Take it
drive?
from there.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you. All right, good morning. So, yeah, as I was asked to speak really about, as a water utility company here in Monmouth County, how we manage the constraints to water supplies, and in some of the area, what we'll call demand management. So, first of all, Fred really covered the universe very well, and it should complement some of the things that I'll speak to. I've got about 5 or 6 slides that are kind of engineering and operations 101, but before I get into those slides, let me just kind of set some context. American Water, its parent company for New Jersey American, we serve about 15 million people nationwide. New Jersey American serves about 2.5 million people here in the state of New Jersey, which in round numbers is approaching 30% of the state population. In Monmouth County, we serve approximately 300,000 people, which is a little less than half of the population in the county. So when we think about that, that's a very serious responsibility our company has and that we take in terms of providing safe and reliable supply to those communities. But it's also one that brings a lot of problems and challenges, and Fred spoke to a few of them. But just off the top of my head, the economic downturn in the last several years has been a challenge to, I think all entities, whether they're private companies, public agencies, put a lot of budget pressure on companies. And so when Fred talks about that next increment of supply being very expensive and customers' either willingness or ability to pay, economics certainly plays into that. Aging infrastructure, so hopefully those weren't our pipes, Fred, but we're dealing with that. That's also another cost pressure. There's been some discussion. We're a heavily regulated industry, and are we over-regulated? You can debate that. I do want to send out a compliment to Fred and the DEP because I think they've done a good job transforming themselves from what I'll say a environmental regulation and enforcement entity to one that is working constructively with the water utility companies across the state and trying to find solutions to the problems that we have, and that's a great relationship that we have. But the one issue when you're a water utility company, whether you're in New Jersey or nationwide, when you have what we call a source of supply deficit, meaning the supplies aren't adequate to meet the demands of the community, that kind of trumps all of the other problems that you have. In a first things first kind of concept, if you don't have the water to provide, all those other problems very quickly become secondary. So here in Monmouth County, we're rapidly approaching that situation. I looked at just some of the history of Monmouth County. So in the mid-50s, the population of Monmouth County was about 300,000. In the last census, I think the population in Monmouth County was about 630,000 people. So that's in my lifetime, the population in this county has more than doubled. And I don't think it's surprising. Monmouth County has, I think, tremendous things to offer, and that's why people are attracted to this county. And I could go, I don't work for the Chamber of Commerce, but having lived in New Jersey a long time, now I live in Burlington County, but my wife and her family have lived here their whole lives. I've spent a lot of time in Monmouth County, and I think it probably has as much to offer as any county in New Jersey and maybe any location in the Northeast. So relative to so the point I didn't make is as that population has increased, the water supplies in the county have been the same. They've been the same for hundreds of years. There really is no more water. Fred talked to you about the confined aquifers. That's it. We've already depleted that source. The surface supplies, very dependent on rainfall and temperature, and there have been some incremental improvements, but essentially it is what we have, and it's up to us to manage that. I think the good news, though, is with education, with awareness, and with cooperation, and especially from folks like you in the room, I think this is a problem that we can manage, and we can manage well. So let me get into the slides a little bit. And, before I go further, I do want to recognize someone here in the back, Juan Donoso. Juan is our production manager for our coastal north operating. So if you want to talk to the guy that actually operates the plants and the systems, Juan is the man that keeps the water flowing in Monmouth County every day. Okay, now we'll see how good I am at manipulating a mouse. There we go. What's that? Got it. Okay, there we go. Good. So I'm going to talk about, I think, really three terms I'll ask you about. And when, as a water utility focuses on demand, we talk about things of average day demand, maximum day demand, and then peak hour or peak period consumption. Those are really the three things I'm going to talk about. But where does that demand come from? This is a typical cross-section of a water system. This represents American Water's average system-wide. But as you can see, the residential use on a water system is generally, 50 or more percent. You add to that the commercial, that generally the commercial is there to support the residential. You're probably in the 75%. In Monmouth County, you see that industrial being 10%. Monmouth County, that industrial is actually a little less. There's not as much industrial use in Monmouth County. So between the residential use and the commercial use, we're probably closer to 80% of our demands are created from those customer categories. And that's very important when I start talking about peak hour demands and specifically irrigation, because a lot of those peak hour demands, that's really where it's coming from. Let's see if I can, all right, there we go. So when we look at average versus maximum day demands, we keep records, so we look at what our history has been in terms of that, and then we also make projections based on population trends and things like this. The blue lines on the bottom are plots for average day demands. And how we determine average day demands, all of those customer classifications on the last slide, we really look at what was the total consumption across all those classes, and we divide by 365. It's not rocket science, and that becomes the average day demand on a system. Maximum day, and that's the blue lines. On the top, the maximum day demands, what we're looking for is what was the maximum demand on the water system in any 24-hour period within that year, and then we plot that. And as you can see, you can get a pretty big range difference between a system that what it has to be able to supply during an average day versus what it is on a maximum day. As we look across all of our systems at American Water, the typical range when you compare maximum day to average day is maybe about 1.25 or 1.5. So meaning on your max day, you're producing anywhere from 25 to 50% more. In Monmouth County, though, that number is approaching 2, meaning our max day is almost double what our average day is. And that puts significant pressure on the water supply, but certainly on the water system as you're trying to manage that going forward. Let's see next. There we go. I mentioned that very temperature and precipitation sensitive, New Jersey's water supply needs, and certainly Monmouth County. This happens to be 2010, which was an extremely hot, dry year for New Jersey, and I'm not going to go into great details, but you can see the southeast, the map on the left showed that the southeast all the way up into New Jersey in 2010 had experienced record heat in the months through June through August. At the same time, the map on the right talks about precipitation, and if you look at New Jersey, it was much below normal during that same time frame. So the next few graphs I'm going to show you are what happens when you have periods of hot, dry weather in New Jersey and what it does to systems like ours. Oops, let's go the right direction. Okay. This is a graph of water supply, and what we're looking here is maximum day demands, or daily demands as that, and this was 2010. And you can see that, in the April-May timeframe, the system was bouncing around a little bit, around 50 MGD, 50 million gallons a day. And then all of a sudden that hot, dry weather started there probably just a little bit after Memorial Day, and you can see the customer demand just started to really go, peak significantly as we went into early July. Probably, maybe in late June, we realized that the system was going to be in trouble, so we started to ask customers for voluntary conservation. And that might have been 2 weeks before the 4th of July. And you can see it didn't have much effect. the water use just continued to go. And as you can see what our firm capacity is, around 80 million, that's 78.5. But the demand on the system went beyond our firm capacity, and it forced us into mandatory water restrictions. That was a big deal. That was and you don't want to put yourself in that situation. But as you can see, it worked. When it was mandatory and there was going to be enforcement, people did curtail water usage, and they brought it back down to almost average day demands. And then as time went, it kind of crept back up, and it ended up in that 70 million gallon a day range. Really, what we're here to talk about is, how can we manage those peaks out of the system and keep those demands, within reasonable levels below the capacity of the system. Now, I talked about maximum day demands, and that was it. Let's talk about peak hours. This happens to be a storage tank. A water utility does not design its system to meet peak hour demands. We try to design it to meet a maximum day demand in terms of our production facilities, our treatment capacity, our pump stations. But what we do is we use distribution storage. So when you see elevated storage and tanks and so forth, it's there to be able to supply the system during those peak hour demands during the day as they occur. It's also very critical. So we call that equalization flow. But that's also where our fire reserve comes from. Our fire protection, because that's where the peaks are. So as you can see, on those days where we were talking about, where you saw that graph before, from about noon to noon to midnight. Midnight to noon the next day. This is one tank in the Monmouth system. As you can see, it was not able to maintain. The demand on that tank was significant, and the level dropped all the way to zero, or close to zero. The scale's a little bit off, which is certainly not where you want to be. So all of our fire reserve was gone. Distribution pressures were impacted. Now I've overlaid our pumping curve. So this shows that, despite the fact that we brought on additional wells, additional pump stations and so forth, in that same time period around 12 p.m., you can see we were trying to increase our pumping. We could not do it enough to meet the demand. And I will tell you that when we've gone back and looked at what created that demand, automatic sprinklers coming on probably anywhere from 2 a.m. to probably 4 a.m. in the morning, and then running till 5 or 6 a.m. Then followed by we normally get a morning peak as people are getting up, getting ready for work. That is really what is stressing and straining our system here in Monmouth County. And then this is my last slide. And it's really intended to be optimistic. This happens to be a case study that the American Water Works Association has used to show you that conservation, public education really can solve this problem. This happened to be a city on the West Coast that back, in the late 90s had made a projection of where their demands were going to go if they didn't begin any form of conservation. And that's that line on the top. So their demands were certainly outpacing the supply that they had. They began at that point in time implementing education, conservation, rate structures that promoted conservation. And as you can see, their demands as of 2010 were well within their supplies and were within management. And then they tried to quantify how they got there. System improvements, that's what Fred was talking about. Tighten up your infrastructure, lose less water, as well as plumbing code implementations and so forth. But you can see a significant one was on those conservation programs. I'm colorblind, but I think that's that blue line on the top. They got a significant amount of the benefit that they were looking for through conservation. So with that, I'll close and I'll turn the program over to the experts who are really going to tell us how we can implement those conservation programs here in Monmouth County.
So Margie is telling me that we have a guest in the audience, Hank Stryker from. Hey, could you come up for a second? From the, help me out, Monmouth County Fire Marshal?
Monmouth County Fire Marshal. I've been asked to say a few words on the fire service in Monmouth County, and as we all know, fire service needs water, so if we don't have it, we got a problem. So the County of Monmouth consists of 53 municipalities with 51 fire departments of 125 fire companies. That utilize 430 pieces of apparatus, manned by approximately 5,000 firefighters, mostly volunteer. Of the 430 pieces of apparatus, there are approximately 230 Class A fire pumpers, which are used to move water from the supply source to the fire scene. The amount of water needed to fight a fire could range from 100 gallons to millions of gallons, depending on the size of the structure and the severity of the fire. A large percentage of fires in Monmouth County occur in single-family homes, and the amount of water needed to fight these fires, according to Insurance Service Organization, range from 500 gallons per minute to 1,500 gallons per minute. So on a single-family structure fire with a response of 3 1,500 gallon per minute engines, the amount of water needed could be upwards of 200,000 gallons per hour. So insufficient amount of water in the storage tanks could cause low pressure in the water system and the fire hydrants, causing an inadequate fire flow to fight the fire. Just because the fire pump is rated 1,500 gallons per minute, if there's not sufficient water at the hydrant, you're not going to be able to flow 1,500 gallons per minute. There are times when there is not sufficient flow to fight fires. There's sometimes due to overusage. It is imperative that water usage be limited and there's an adequate water supply to fight fires when it is needed. Because what could possibly happen when you do not have an adequate water supply or run out of water to extinguish a fire or control the fire, this could result in additional property loss, injury to civilians and firefighters, and possible deaths could occur. I mean, I don't want to be the gloom and doom, but that's what it's all about. I was asked to tell how many fires we have in Monmouth County a year. And on the average, I would say we have about 200 working fires per year. And it could range from, like I said, single-family homes to bigger buildings, industrial complexes, things like that. It's, as Monmouth County Fire Marshal, I've been doing this for 30 years. So I've seen times when we've had really bad water supplies during the summer. We've had to move tankers up, do things like that. And it's very stressful for the fire service. The chiefs they become very stressed over this, and I become very stressed over it. I'll tell you, to be very honest, because we start moving apparatus to different areas, and because they have no water supply. And sometimes it's due to a broken water main, a major main could break. Even in my town has a municipal water system, and I got a call one day, they said that the 1-million-gallon tank was empty. And I says, how'd that happen? And the guy says, we don't know. Well, they found out that a pipe had broke out in the middle of a field somewhere, and no one knew it until the tank was that dry. So it happens. I mean, we can't stop this stuff from happening. But like I said, the fire service, we adapt any way we have to adapt. But like I said, it becomes very stressful. So, I mean, that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, I can answer them. But